Well, we shall endeavour to make a start. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Bertrand Verduzier and Odilon de Varenne. Odilon is the cellar master at Champagne Gosset, and Bertrand is the international director. A little bit of background about Gosset. Gosset originally was founded in Aix in 1584, making it the oldest wine house in Champagne. Of course, in those days, it was predominantly red still wine. Then I believe it was it 94, Bertrand, when the property in Epinay was purchased,
That's right.
making a larger base. And also around that time, I believe, was when Gosset hit the initial 1 million bottles annually production.
A few years later, after the Cointreau from the Cointreau Frappin from the Cognac area acquired the property, the domain in the early 90s. Then Gosset was a very niche brand. It's still relatively small compared to others, of course, as a house in Champagne. But yes, there was a development in the presence of Gosset, especially with restaurants in those years. Yeah.
Now we want also to brush on a few reasons why Gosset is different. Also wanted to run through to mark the release of the 12-year-old, the Gosset 12 ans de Cave Minima. We'll discuss the concept of time and aging. Bertrand has a bottle there. Sadly, I don't have a bottle with me.
David,
I have a Magnum. We still have a few Magnums. So yeah, really wanted to run through a few, about the reserve wines, aging on the lees, aging off the lees. Also, the production of Gosset doesn't involve malolactic fermentation, obviously how that affects the aging capabilities as well. So, Odilon, did you want to give a little introduction to the stylistic differences of Gosset?
Well, the main idea at Gosset is to have the consistency of the taste. So I would say there is no specific ideas. There is mainly adapting of the crop, adapting of what we want to do. This is the key of winemaking at Gosset, because each year is different, and the main idea is to have the consistency of the taste, especially on the non-vintage. You were talking about the 12 years. It's totally different.
Now, in terms of the, because the 12 ans is similar blend, I believe, to the Grand Reserve. Is that correct?
Sorry to say no. No, it's not the same, because the idea for the blend was to make a blend that can age and take maturity with the lees and not with the blend at the beginning. It was a very special idea to find the deepness, the depth of the wine by aging on the lees and not right from the beginning with more Pinot Noir, more whatever, to add more body and more structure. We wanted the structure to be there only by the aging on lees. That's why the blend is different.
Yeah, it
does. But and it is also from multi-vintages, the 12 years.
It is.
Yes.
It is. It is mainly 06 vintage with reserve wine from previous years, yes.
And in terms of reserve wines, that Gosset, no sort of oak influence is evident, really, is it? It's
No,
all
we don't have any oak at Gosset because, as you said, we are not going through the malolactic. So that's why we don't have any oak to preserve from all the bacteria.
and the reserve wines, they are, I believe, on the lees as well. Is this correct?
For the reserve one, we've got I would say, quite a special policy because we don't care about the year of the reserves. I can't tell you if it's a tank of 2017, 2016 or more. What is interesting for us, it's to know what the reserve wine will bring in the blend. So we store the wines not by year, but by the interest they will bring in the blend. So we've got wines with freshness, with length, with body, with minerality, with meat palate, with many things, but stored like that, not on vintage or whatever.
And on aging on the lees in the bottle,
Yeah.
the standard length of time for the majority of the Gosset, the Grand Reserve and the Rosé, for instance, they would be how long?
Well, you're talking about the lees. We keep the wine, the still wine on lees from the end of the first fermentation right to the blend. So even in the tanks, they spend about 6 to 9 months on the lees, with sometimes removing the lees in the tanks before the blending. That's we don't have the reserve one on lees, but the still wines are stored on lees. And then for the Grand Rosé and the Grand Reserve, I would say it depends. The time on lees depend on the wine itself. It's the wine who lead the vinification. So sometimes, once again, to have depth, to have the complexity of the wine we are looking for, sometimes there are wine that needs 3 years, sometimes needs 4, sometimes needs 5. It depends. It depends on the crop. Each year is different. So you need to play with this aging on lees to have the consistency.
It's important to consider that we want to discuss about the time of aging, which is taking different shape. Time on the lees, time of the lees, and it varies a lot, and both are quite important. Again, it's very important to consider that the goal for Gosset is to have a style where the raw material, which is freshness in champagne, is preserved as much as possible. So to your point, David, that's why we don't do the malolactic fermentation. That's why we don't use any oak. And that's why the philosophy of the vinification at Gosset, so everything that takes place before the aging, is about letting the wine nourishing from its own components, including the natural yeast. Let's continue. So I think it's important to see that all those elements, if you want, that are stable across the range, are here to preserve a lot of the freshness. And because you do that, because you have your no malolactic, because of course, in terms of sourcing the grapes, we are a lot on the historical vineyard, the chalky soils, and a lot on the Chardonnay as well. You have a lot of freshness to start with. Ah, welcome.
Welcome.
So if you're on, the idea of the aging is going to be led by this starting point, which is retaining a lot of freshness. So that demands basically time for the wine to naturally soften in the bottle after the blend. So it's important to understand that what we're going to discuss, of course, it's about this type of style. So maybe to describe the style of Gosset, the idea, Odilon mentioned it when we briefly touched on the 12 years, but it's to have it's to have structure, it's to have depth, in the wine, which is not a contradiction with freshness, with liveliness, with intensity. In Champagne, it's not an opposition between light, acidic, thin wines and big, heavy. No, and you don't want either of those. You want to have wines that are very much on the freshness, very much very active, very dynamic, very lively and naturally lively. But they have depth, they have structure at the same time. And I guess that's the idea that you will find when you look at Gosset wines, from the rosé, a bit lighter in style, through the Grande Réserve, which we'll discuss in a moment, which is our flagship cuvée, and up to the vintages and the limited edition, like the 12 years, to gain in intensity and in flesh in a way, but in a very natural way, because the idea, as you understand from the vinification process, is to preserve the natural freshness and not to add things, including oak, for instance. So it's within this framework that we can discuss, of course, trying to achieve this. What we can discuss what is the policy, if you want, or what is the approach of aging. But I would like probably Odilon first, if you can explain again, because we always talk about the time of aging after bottling and in bottle, and of course. And I think just before that, we'll make again a point on reserve wines. But just a few words, maybe quickly, if you want, on the time on the lees in vats already before bottling, because people are not always aware of this moment between harvest and
Yes. Well, as I told you, we keep the wine just after the fermentation. We make a first soutirage, and then we keep the wine on a fine lees, which means the fine lees, it's quite only the yeast. And we keep the wine on this fine lees from September to May. So
quite a long
time. With it depends on the tanks. It depends on what we want to do with the tanks, what we want to have with the wine. So, and also it depends on the year, because sometimes some year you don't need to have this long aging on lees, because you have right from the beginning depth and structure in the wine. You do that when you want more finesse, more depth, more structure on the wines. And in some tanks, we just leave the lees. In other tanks, we remove the lees with the wine, like we do in Burgundy, what they call bâtonnage. We can't do bâtonnage because the tanks are too big.
Put it back in suspension.
That's it. That's it. Exactly. I think it's a key point at Gosset, and when we play with the lees, sometimes we take the lees of the Chardonnay to put on the Pinot Noir tank to bring more minerality, more freshness in the Pinot Noir or in the Pinot Meunier. It's a really big part of aging on lees, even on the still wine. And then after the bottling, as I told you, it depends. It depends on the crop. It depends on the blend. Some blends needs to spend more time on lees than the others. That's why we are not making FIFO. Is it an English term? First in, first out in the cellar. It depends on tasting. It depends. Sometimes the wines need more time compared to others. So that's why we always say that our champagne is around 3 to 4 years on average. It's not stuck in the stone because the wine is alive. So it depends on it. It depends on his own character and what he wants to do.
So do you want to talk about the first wine, or?
You want me to talk about what?
No, David, do you want us to explain the idea of aging with
Absolutely.
different wines?
With the context
Or maybe just again, so that everybody understands the idea of reserve wines. You understand that after vinification, there are two directions for the wine. There is one which is the blend of the year, and there is one which is reserve wines.
Absolutely.
Which at Gosset are kept in stainless steel vats as well, because it's not obvious, but they are also kept in stainless steel vats of a certain size this time, in order to melt, and in order for each vat, as Odilon said before, to represent not a time of aging in vats, not at all, but to represent a character. Character of some Chardonnay, different character, which will then contribute to balancing the main year when they are reintegrated in the blend. So that's the two directions. So just to I think it's something a bit different. I go say it's not always easy to know exactly what competitors do, but it's something very strong at Gosset, because I hear personally when I travel, when I used to travel, colleagues from different houses talking about the age of reserve wines. We don't talk at Gosset, as you know, David. We don't talk about the age of our reserve wines. Of course, there are different years blended together, but it's not the idea. The idea is the character of each vat, or the color, if you want, of each vat. How this color is going to integrate the painting, if you want, of a certain blend, of a certain cuvée, basically. I think it's quite important in the style.
Definitely. And I think, well, the Grand Reserve, that's the flagship. That's the difficult one to make sure it's identical or as close to the style as Gosset as every time you open a bottle.
Yeah.
So would you like to elaborate on the sort of the philosophy behind that?
Well, when you're talking about Grand Reserve, Grand Rosé, or Blanc de Blanc, the main idea is consistency of the taste. It's, I think, the most important thing when you are talking about a brand in Champagne. That's the only appellation where the brand is so strong. You don't have that in other appellation in France or all over the world. Just because with these wine and in Champagne, you have to have the consistency of the taste year to year, even if the crop is different, even if the ripeness is different. That's the main thing in Champagne. That's why the blend is so important. And Bertrand was talking about the reserve wine. That's why they are so important, because you can have a lack of something 1 year, a lack of maturity, a lack of freshness, a lack of minerality, and you take the reserve wine just like spices to complement the blend. And that's
like pepper.
And that's the way to have this consistency. And you were talking about the style. We have to have the same taste years to years with the Grand Reserve, and that's why, to be really honest, we add more Chardonnay now than we've done in the past. I don't know if it's because of the global changing climate, changing of viticultural, changing of the age of the vines, or whatever. But the fact is, to keep the freshness, to keep the elegance of what we've always done at Gosset, we need now to add more Chardonnay in our blends. That's why I always say the enemy of vinification, especially in Champagne, is the recipe. Because you have to adapt each year of the material and what you want to do, what you have to do for the style of the house to have this consistency. So you have to be aware of many things with the grapes, with the location they come from, with the vinification, the time on lees, on the first fermentation, many other things. It's the key point for consistency, for the style of the house. And a key point is at Gosset is that all the tasting we do for the blend are always made blind, just to have no preconscious idea about the cru we are tasting. Because I'm sure that if you taste the Grand Cru and then the Premier Cru and then the others, you will have some, you won't taste them on the same way, because if it's a Grand Cru and you know that it is a Grand Cru, you will taste it differently compared to the others.
Yeah.
That's why we want to have all blind, just to focus on the wine and to focus of what we want to, of the aim of the blend. The aim is what we want to do with the Grand Reserve, the Grand Rosé, or the Blanc de Blanc. It's totally different for vintages, but that's why. And you said, David, the Grand Reserve is probably one of the more difficult wine to do, because it's we have to have that. That's why it's so difficult.
Yeah, and 2 years ago was the Specialty Drinks Whiskey Exchange Champagne of the Year as well. So
It was.
absolutely.
So the aging on Grand Reserve, you know, basically we're talking about around 4 years in general. Again, as Odilon said, it's not stuck in stone, but to give you an idea, yes, it's probably the most difficult one to make at Gosset, because we don't want to make it another entry, light, bubbly aperitif wine. We want to make it the flagship of Gosset, so it demands, you know, shoulders, it demands all the elements that make hopefully a great wine. So it's but it's a wine that then, you know, of course, no matter lactic as the others, demands some time on the lees. But I like to say, because we had the opportunity with Odilon to do some tasting with customers in Epernay. So basically, you think 4 years on the lees, and then we'll talk about this because it's the time of the lees, which is quite important as well. And if you want, basically at Gosset, there is 6 months after disgorgements of additional aging, which is not nothing.
Once again, it depends on the cuvée. And it depends on the blend. Even when we are talking about one cuvée, which is the Grand Reserve, I can't tell you it's 6 months after disgorgement, because some cuvées, some blend need more time to have the right balance compared to others. So sometimes we have wine that has not less than 6 months after disgorgement, but sometimes you could have 2 years. It depends. And the disgorgement is the time only is important, but the time after disgorgement is very important to rebalance the wine after it's aging in the cellar.
And you can keep, my point was, you can keep a wine at Grand Reserve, you can, because we've done this tasting of all bays of Grand Reserve. And Grand Reserve is made in such a way that it's ready when it's released, of course, but we've tried, you know, from the 90s, from the 80s, even from the late 70s, the Grand Reserve, from original disgorgement, so probably between, I don't know, 4 years on the lees, but with extended time of the lees this time, because we'll talk about extended time on the lees, but of the lees with Grand Reserve, you know, keeping this wine in the cellar, it just works beautifully, you know, for the wine to soften naturally and to express its own character, because that's probably what the time of the lees does as well. So just on Grand Reserve, it's really a wine that I don't recommend you keep it because it should be perfect when when it's in the market. But it's certainly a wine that can age extremely well, where the balance can go a long way.
Yeah, when you're talking about balance, about aging off lees, what we call off lees is aging that you can age in your own cellar.
Yeah.
That's why disgorgement time is so important, because you have to disgorge the wine to put off the lees. I prefer the term putting off the lees than disgorgement. You have a special time to do it when the balance of oxidation and reduction is on the top, on the right balance. If you disgorge the wine when it's still reductive, you will have this reduction all along the wine life. If you wait too long, you will be on oxidized sides, and you can't get rid of oxidation after. So you've got the right time when the balance is just flat to disgorge the wine. That's why sometimes it takes 3 years, sometimes it takes 4, sometimes it takes 5. It depends. It depends on the wine itself. And when you do this on the right time, you can keep the wine after for a very long time, because you're not what we call in French, it's not bancal, you see. It's just balance. And I know you were there when we've done a tasting in London with very, I would say, all disgorged wine on the Grand Reserve. We had wine that had more than 30 years of disgorgement, and it was still fresh because it has been disgorged at the right time. Disgorgement is one of the most important thing in the winemaking in Champagne. That's why aging on lees, we were talking about aging in bottle, aging in tanks, but aging in bottles, you can have two ways of aging. You can age the bottle like that, with all the lees here. So you've got a big, a large
surface area
of exchange.
But when we taste the wine and we see that it's coming on the reductive side, we riddle the bottle and keep then what we call sur pointe. The lees are still there, but the exchange is not all around this, but just a drop.
It's tiny.
Yeah. So it's important too to understand the aging in bottle in Champagne, and sometimes even in bottle we remove the lees in the bottle. It's it was what I was telling you. We have to adapt. We have to adapt on each cuvée each time. It's never the same way to make the wine. It's always different because each cuvée is different.
Excellent. The 12 years, that was 12 years on the lease?
The 12 years, it was, a special idea we had at Gosset to show that Champagne can age, that Champagne is first a wine, and we wanted to have very different idea of the wine. When we made the blend, the idea was to have the complexity, the depth coming from the aging on lees and not from the blend. So it was a special blend, and it is 12 years because we thought that the right balance was there. It could have taken 15, 16, 20, I don't know. It is 12 because it's 12. It could have been 8. It was not a purpose to make a 12 years. It's just because the wine guide this to 12 years, to have the right balance, the balance we wanted to have. So it was the idea of aging on lees, you know, when you're aging on lees, you prevent the wine from oxidation because you're on a reductive side. And the more you age on lees, the more the wine will be protected from oxidation afterwards. And the more you have, once again, complexity coming from the lees, coming from the dead lees, and the dead yeast, sorry. And it was an experiment we've done several times, and we just wanted to share that. We've done the first one, it was 3 years ago with the 15 years.
15.
And then we made it with the 12, and I hope there will be some others. And I can't tell you now if it will be 8, 9, 20, 30. I don't know.
But that means that
We'll wait and see.
the idea of time is becoming more important for us, and probably for some, you know, wine enthusiasts looking for the right time of aging. I think it's quite important. 12 years in a bottle for wine of Champagne, people may think it's a long time. First, wine of Champagne can age extremely well, and I think it's one of our message tonight. Is to say that when you have the right balance of the blend, when you have the right raw material, when you have the right everything, you can go a very long way with Champagne. And people, because I'm conscious we're talking to people here that like Champagne, and you know, Champagne can age extremely well. But you know, with the 12 years, you really have. I say you bring the time of aging in the bottle. It's already provided, if you want. But also, in the same thing as we said, as the Grand Reserve, it's a wine that obviously you can keep much longer because it was prepared with a long time on the lees, and it has this additional complexity, this additional depth, and you know, that was added during all those years. It's a long time, 12 years on the lees, when you think about it.
Well,
Yeah, although last year we, of course, had the Celebriziem 95 release.
Yeah, we will talk about the 95. But I just wanted to add something about the 12 or the 15 years, about the idea. The idea was that it was for us to an idea of transparency of aging. Aging, I would say maturing more than aging. Maturing should be the right term, because when you have a vintage, you don't know how long it's spent on the lees. You know that it's at least 3 years, but you can't know if it's 3, 5, 6, 7, 10, 15, whatever. So the idea was, we are not talking about vintages. We are talking about maturing, and we assure you that it spent 12 years on the lees. That's sure. And it's another way of thinking Champagne. It's another way of transparency.
Yeah. And it's probably more important information than, for instance, because we are asked this all the time, the time of disgorgement, which really is not as valid and as important. You need to know how long your wine was aged. I think that's very important. It's more important than the vintage. It's more important than the time of disgorgement. So you know this wine was over 12 years, and that's a very strong statement.
And is that a unique thing to Gosset? Is there any other producers labeling?
Well, at least we started the concept.
I don't think so. I haven't seen.
Me neither.
I haven't seen either, no. But I think it's interesting because it goes a long way, 15 years, which was actually 17 years, because, that's the beauty of, I think, small production and artisanal approach. It was the first time that we made wine like this, stating the year. So when we declared it, it was 15 on the list. So we said, let's call it 15. And in the end, because at Odilon's point, when he decides on things, on key things about the wine, it's according to the wines, and it's often by blind tasting. So
When it's
it was eventually 17 years, but it was still at least 15. And I think it's really the idea of time. You know, we've been talking a lot about terroir in those last 10, 15 years, and of course it's very important. There is no question, but we need to add something else. We need to really. I think we realize the idea of time is really not conveyed enough in Champagne. And we realized this because people were asking all the time about the date of disgorgement and discussing with the people, with the with the trade, with journalists, with the customers, with sommeliers. We realized that we were focused on this time of disgorgement, and we're not talking about what's outside this. What's important, is the time in the bottle makes champagne special in the production of wine. That's something which is pushed further, and that makes the complexity. So, I think it's good to emphasize on that and to say, terroir, yes, you make a blend, but then the story begins, and I think we can have a lot of fun proposing wines that really convey an idea that everybody can catch. When you have the 12 years, I've just opened it, by the way.
I saw.
Because,
I'm a little envious.
yes, and because I know later on with family we're going to have some monkfish, and it's also the idea of having champagne, of course, contribute to certain times, to certain moments, and the time is a very strong ally when it comes to make champagne what it is, which is much more than just, again, a light, thin aperitif wine, but a wine with structure, a wine with minerality, a wine with depth. And that's at Gosset what we want to convey. So the time helps us, if you want, to release this character.
Fascinating. And the 95, the Celebrisienne that we brushed on earlier, that was age. Oh, you have a bottle.
I have a bottle there.
Excellent.
And it's not open, as you can see. Not yet.
I see.
Well, this is, I would say, a late release for the Célébris 95, Célébrissime. We wanted to have both idea of aging with this cuvée. We keep the wine longer than the others on the lees compared to the 95 we sold and when it was the time. We keep this bottle longer on lees, and we leave them for at least 10 years after disgorgement. Because we tasting after tasting, we've seen that this wine was taking more interest, which is not the right term, but a different interest in tasting, I would say, in aging after disgorgement on sugar, on liquor. And it was also to show that even after 10 years, because we sold them after 10 years after disgorgement, to show that we can keep the wine even 10 years. It has spent 10 to 12 on lees and 10 off lees, just to show that champagne is a wine and you can keep it for a very long time. Sure, it's different, and we are not talking about bubbles when we are tasting this wine. We are talking about wine. I would say the bubbles made their job. Their job was to prevent the wine from oxidation, was to add freshness. But after a while, the bubble have to hide compared to the wine, and that's what we wanted to show, that this champagne is a wine, even if you've got less bubble. That's what we wanted to have, to focus on the wine, not on the bubbles.
Yeah, that's very important. We to mention it's a different cuvée at Gosset. Huh? It's called Célébris, and under this shade, because it's the first release, it's the first late release of a Célébris vintage, because Célébris is already vintage. So it's called Célébrissime to differentiate between the two. And what Odilon just described is the idea of double aging, to really have a long time, huh? not 2 years, a long time on the lees, including some time upside down sur pointe, which can take sometimes a few months, even a few years, and then a long time, even a very long time off the lees, to achieve other layers of complexity. You know,
but you know, I
don't
say
know.
we've got time. Bertrand is talking about time, but we've got time. It's not a secret, but we have not released the 96 vintage Célébris for the moment. It's still in the cellar, because we think that it's not on the right. It needs more time, and it's nearly 24 years now, but it needs more time. That's why we still have the 96 vintage Célébris in the cellar.
I'm looking forward to that. I'll be watching keenly for that one.
Maybe sometime soon. Maybe not.
Sure.
We have
I
time.
don't know. The wine design.
Excellent. Fantastic. Well, I think we've nearly hit our hour. Now, is there anything you want to, anything else you wanted to say?
Well, you know, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go on. No, I think with Célébris and with the 12 years, I show you again the label, because, well, you know, with Gosset, it's always the same bottle, the old antique bottle, but this one is a blue label. Yes, I think at the moment we are really, at the moment, by the way, but we are really, I think, trying to emphasize on the idea of time at Gosset very much, and with Célébris, and with what we call the condage, so the products with the aging on the lees, I think clearly our focus becomes more about using an expression that Odilon uses in general, but it's not used it yet. It's to say, to provide the time that the people don't have anymore. And I think Champagne is perfectly suited for that. You know, we are a family ancient house in Champagne, and the goal is to be innovative in the way we propose the wines, but it's to be true to a long tradition. So we're not going to adapt for the short term. And I think working the idea of time in the cellars, you know, providing the cuvées at the right time, starting with Grande Réserve, starting with Grand Rosé, it's our goal. And so the idea of time more and more is becoming very important for us. And I guess that the recent times that we have lived this year in 2020, it's just another way to appreciate the time differently and to appreciate the wine differently, because wine is very important in all circumstances, especially now.
Okay.
For instance. But no,
Well,
just more commercially speaking, sorry, but I know the 12 years is I'm just saying that for the people listening, and of course I know there are champagne aficionados. The 12 years we're having, and thank you very much, a very nice success already with this wine we just launched, and it's available from the Whiskey Exchange, of course, and it's a very small production. I didn't want to talk numbers on a Friday night, but it's very small quantities, and I'd go say we like to have small parcels like this available, and it's not going to last much further after spring. So if you really, I don't want to be too commercial, but if you really want to grab a bottle, Whiskey Exchange, of course, is providing it, and it won't last. We made 12,000 bottles for the world, so it's quite rare, and you know, I mean, my glass smells quite nice, and 12 years in the bottle, and you see it's a nice price for the. I can ensure it's a nice price for what you get in the glass.
Fantastic.
If I
Well,
may.
thanks so much, Bertrand, and thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
David.
Odilon. It was great that you could finally get the camera working.
I'm very sorry
But great
for the
to
starting.
see you, and hopefully next time we meet will be in person. But we shall
Hopefully,
fingers crossed.
yes.
Hopefully.
And thank you to the Champagne Show, and long life to the Champagne Show.